Hey everyone, how's it going? So what am I working on now? Well, actually, I just finished this one. I never made an actual video on this truck. It's an '01 F-150 with a 4.6. It came towed into us, not running. And the customer's complaint was that it was running really bad for a long period of time and then it just finally died. Okay. So we get it in and I check it out. It's got no fuel pressure, no fuel pump. Okay. I actually started to make a video on putting a fuel pump in this thing, and I don't know what happened. This was right about the time when my phone, I had to change my phone, and I think I lost the video. I'm not quite sure, but something happened, and I never had the video, so obviously I never posted it. So, put the fuel pump in it, got it running. Okay, it runs, got it up, it starts, runs fine. As soon as it warms up, not as soon as it warms up, let's put it this way. It starts up, runs fine. As it's warming up, it starts running worse and worse and worse. Okay. That's weird. Like, running rich. Okay. I go and I grab the scanner and I start looking. And I could see both upstream O2s are pinned rich. Like 900 and something millivolts. Like 920, 915, something in that range, millivolts. Alright, well that's weird. But you could smell the exhaust. I mean, rich. Alright. No big deal. At that point, it was low on fuel, too. When I pulled the tank down, like, at first, I really thought this thing may have run out of fuel, but I couldn't hear a fuel pump. That's why I put a fuel pump in it. When I had it out, I realized there's about 1.5 gallons, 2 gallons left in the tank. There was still enough in there to where it'll run. So I was like, okay, maybe the gas is kind of wonky in this thing. Who knows how long this thing was sitting. So I went and got 5 gallons of gas, threw 5 gallons of gas in it. Well, still runs the same. All right. So from that point, I let it sit overnight. I started up the next day. Runs great. Okay. Take it down the road. Runs great. Turn around and come back. Starts running worse. Running terrible by the time I get to the shop. Black smoke out the tailpipe. I mean, like a diesel would, pump smoke out the tailpipe. So I'm like, oh man, alive, this is really, really strange. So, I don't know if that light's any good or not. The light's killing me, it's just in a bad angle. So, at that point, I'm like, okay, what the heck's going on? So I look and the O2s are pinned at like 9 something. Super, super rich. Alright, well, short-term trims were staying at 0. Why are they staying at 0? So I'm looking. It's in what's called open loop. When you first start a car up, it's in what's called open loop, meaning there's a program in the computer. There's a program preset in the computer that keeps the car running rich, basically. Like on an old car, when you start it up and you hit the gas pedal to set the choke, or on any older vehicle that has like a manual choke, you have to turn the choke on to get it to start because you need to richen the fuel mixture up to make them start. All right. So it's in open loop. Why is it in open loop? Well, because the O2s are stuck super rich. So, all right, let me put a set of O2 sensors in this thing. So at that point, I put the thing in the shop, put it back up in the air, and I changed the 2 front O2 sensors. I start it up, runs great. Before I get it out of the shop, it starts running terrible again. So I'm like, what the heck is going on here? So I look, and I happen to realize this thing had some ultra cheap coils, ignition coils. Now on a 4.6, the ignition coils, let me show you real quick. On a 4.6, the ignition coils right here, these are brand new standards that I put in here. Look how close the coils are to the injectors. Okay, not that it means anything, but I just want you to note that for later on. So I was like, I went and I looked, and on the coil itself, it said danger, lethal voltage. Shut up. Really? Lethal voltage. It's a gimmick to make people think that they're getting something that's really great. When I looked it up, the price on all 8 coils through Amazon was the same as 1 coil. 1 quality coil. So I'm like, how good can these things possibly be? So I'm like, all right. Now, looking at this engine too, I realized somebody had messed around with this thing. So you could see stuff had been taken off and put back on. You could see witness marks on the bolts. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what was actually done to this truck, but we're going to find out. So at that point, I'm like, you know what? I don't trust these coils. Let me put a set of coils in this thing. Now, all this time too, when it first started, when I was first having these issues, one of my friends is the guy from Chrysler who, as a tech, if you had problems that you could not figure out, he was the guy that they sent to the dealership to work with you to try to figure out what's going on. Him and I became friends during my time at Chrysler. So I bounce stuff off of him every once in a while because he's very intelligent, and it's always good for somebody in my position to have somebody that I can bounce stuff off of. Here at Joe and Mo's shop, I don't have anybody I can bounce anything off of. So I'm bouncing it off of him, and he agrees with me about the coils, that they could be an issue. So I had actually ohmed out the coils, and ohming them out, on the secondary side of the coil, I had 1 mega ohm difference between the new coils from standard and those cheap aftermarket ones. I'm like, well, 1 mega ohm, that's huge. Yeah, 1 mega ohm. That's huge. Massive. So that could create a problem. All right. I pull the coils out. I look at the spark plugs. They are soot-fouled spark plugs. All right. Let me put a set of plugs in this thing, too. I change everything over. Exactly the same thing. I'm like, what is going on here? It's like it thinks it's in cold mode. So I'm checking everything I can think to check on this thing. I did a compression test. I did a leak down test. I checked the cylinder head temperature sensor on this. I checked fuel pressure, because if fuel pressure is too high, you could do that. I checked fuel pressure, make sure that it was where it was supposed to be. I did a vacuum test. I did a plugged exhaust test. Every test under the sun I did to this thing, and I couldn't get this thing running right. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I bounced the information off my buddy Alan, the Chrysler guy. I bounced it off my son-in-law, who happens to be a Ford Master Tech. I bounced it off another buddy of mine who used to be a Chrysler Master Tech. He was also a Ford service manager. I bounced it off of him. And the conclusion came back that it's possible you got a bad PCM and it's staying stuck in the cold mode. Okay. Now, the reason we're thinking it's a bad PCM and not anything else at this point is because it's both banks of the motor, and it's not one cylinder in particular. It's all cylinders. So like, okay. So we went and we found a used PCM, and let me tell you something. My son-in-law told me that good luck finding a PCM for that truck, because they had a lot of problems with PCMs. He said good luck finding one that you can use on that truck, because they have to be programmed. Okay. Sure enough, it took us, I think, 2 months before we actually found one that we could use, and got it shipped to us. So we got a PCM, got it installed, had our programmer come down. Now, our programmer is a drivability specialist. He's the guy that goes to the dealerships when they have drivability issues that nobody can figure out in this area. He came in, he programmed it. Guess what? Same exact thing. So him and I were outside with our heads together trying to figure out what's going on with this truck. And he was at a loss too. It's like, what is going on? Nothing makes any sense. And like I said, here's the key. Here's the key to what the actual problem was. Or I shouldn't say it's a key, but it was running rich on both banks. Not one cylinder in particular was showing anything more exaggerated than any other cylinder, except cylinder 7 seemed to show more of a misfire than any other cylinder, but that's it. It wasn't by much either. It was just a little greater than the others. So we're sitting there just trying to figure it out, and finally we're like, is it possible the injectors are the wrong injectors? Is it possible the injectors are no good? How could all the injectors be no good? I actually ohmed them all out. They all ohmed out good. I had even gotten a brand new single injector from the parts store, and it happened to be a Ford Motorcraft. And I ohmed it out. And the original ones that are in here, or at least I think they're original, I don't know, they ohmed out relatively close. So I'm like, okay, I don't think it's the injectors, because all the injectors were within a very small percentage of each other. So I'm like, it's not the injectors. Now, on Ford color codes their injectors. I'm sure a lot of other companies do too, but Fords are color coded. If you look, these things have that yellowish orange top. Some of them will be red, some of them will be gray, some of them will be blue, but these are that orange yellow color. As luck would have it, we actually had the identical truck towed in a day before this PCM showed up with a blown transmission. Customers trying to decide if they want to fix it or not. They decided not to. Too much money on the truck. Truck's not worth it. It's got body damage, stuff like that. But it runs great. It runs great, but it's got 200,000 miles on it. All right, so they don't want to fix it. So now we're at that point of, okay, what do we do here? Like, let's change the injectors. We changed all the injectors on this. Now it runs perfect. How do all 8 injectors go bad? Well, I'm thinking maybe it's not all 8 injectors went bad, but I'm thinking at least 6 of them went bad, 3 on each side. But how does that even happen? That's a good question. I honestly think it was those cheap junk aftermarket coils. Why do I think that? Let me show you. Because if you look down here, look at the orientation of that coil to that injector. They're right up against one another on this motor. So those cheap coils, if they were emitting some kind of an EMI, some kind of magnetic force, I don't know. This is just a guess at this point. I'd be willing to bet they ruined the injectors. Ruined the injectors and created that whole problem. I'd be willing to bet on that. That's why I don't use cheap aftermarket junk. Now, of course, I can't prove any of this. It's just a guess on my part. But I think that's what happened. That's, like I said, that's another reason I won't use cheap aftermarket stuff. I'll use aftermarket stuff, and I'll use inexpensive aftermarket stuff. I won't use cheap aftermarket stuff. The coils did not, of course, hurt the fuel pump or anything like that. That had nothing to do with that. So, but we got to button this thing back up now. Like I said, here's, we already paid for a computer, so it's just going to sit here for right now. But we got to put this all back together because we have to straighten out a few things. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that it was something that we just could not chase down. This was the last thing I would have expected was the injectors. How do all of them go bad? But anyway, I just thought that was really interesting. I thought I would share that with you. But yeah, this one really fought me. And but there again, it's a learning experience. I learned from this. I know what's going on now. If I ever have something else like that come in and I see that it's, even if I don't see it, it's got cheapo aftermarket injectors, I would have expected that this thing had a single cylinder misfire on one side, a single cylinder misfire on the other side, something along those sides. But for both sides to be super rich, sorry, I was getting a phone call. For each side to be super rich like the way it was, but then run fine when it was cold. Oh, and it ran fine on the road if you were at full throttle. So it's just very odd. Anyway, so that's about it. Yeah, this one was a butt kicker. This one really was a butt kicker. But I learned something. So hopefully you did too. Don't use cheap aftermarket stuff. All right, that's about it. So if you're getting something out of my videos, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. Tell your friends too. And if you could, share my videos. I would really appreciate that. It helps me. If you look down in the description, I have links to Amazon products that I personally use. And it's stuff that's very good for the homeowner, the guys that do your own work in your driveway, guys and girls. Wish there was actually more women in this industry, but there isn't, unfortunately. But that's neither here nor there. So anyway, that's it, guys. Hope you had a great day. Keep wrenching.